Here. Great job, Nick. That video was awesome. And it fits a lot with what I was trying to share today. So I'm going to pull this up real fast. Share screen. Boom. Press this button. Sweet. So, man, I get nervous every time that I talk to a crowd. But I have a secret that can turn all that kind of anxiety into fuel. And this is my secret right here. Eddie would go. So I will like whisper this to myself before I would knock on a door in the Philippines on my mission, before I stand up in front of a customer, before situations like this. And some of you might know what it means. And for those of you that don't, let me show you real quick why it matters, how it ties to who I am, who my family is, and what we're doing together as a company. And just give you a little bit of a preview here. So there was a 30 for 30 on one of my dad's heroes. His name was Eddie Aikau. And he was an incredible hero in my family. And he started off just wanting to do one thing, and that was to win the Duke Kahanamoku surfing tournament. So he was up against a bunch of pros from Australia and California. There's all this tension, but he went on and he won it. And that was in the late 60s. And that's when my dad was only about 10 years old and just idolized Eddie. And after that, Eddie could have just gone on and just been famous and tried to get rich. But instead, what he decided to do is become a lifeguard at Waimea Bay. And at the point, they had just barely dared to try and surf there in the 50s, and they started the Duke tournament there in the 60s. And so he went on to save 500 people without missing anybody as a lifeguard. And then time went on even farther, and the Hawaiian people generally as a culture began to ask, like, who are we and what do we still remember? And a lot of what they used to believe in had been forgotten. And so this artist, started to ask the question of, how did we even get on the island? And Polynesia is like 600 to 1 water to land. And they began to ask, how did people even end up on this chunk of rock in the first place? So he was looking up in the stars, and one of the stars in the Big Dipper is called Arcturus, or in Hawaiian they call it Hokulea. And as he was looking up at the stars, he says, I'm going to build a ship based on what I've learned about the Hawaiian people and call it the Hokulea. And so this was it. And he went and gathered a crew of people, and Eddie decided he was going to volunteer and be one of about 15 people who went on this boat and traveled around the islands to show people that they could remember the way that they used to be guided by the stars and navigate to all the different islands. And they were successful. They had a few different trips. They went, a couple thousand miles down to Tahiti. But one day they were doing a smaller trip just between the Hawaiian Islands. Huge storm comes up and it knocks that boat over upside down. And you would think, okay, I would just hang onto the boat. The boat hasn't sunk yet. I'm just going to stick with it. And they did that for 10 hours. And right around then, Eddie's like, I'm a lifeguard and a world famous surfer, and I've got a board right there. And he kept on saying to the captain, please, will you let me go? Will you let me go? Just let me get on this board and just go and get some help. Captain said, no. And after 10 hours of that, he let him go. So Eddie goes off, paddles 10 miles to try and find help. 10 hours more, so 20 hours now, upside down, clinging onto that boat. Finally, a plane came along and saved the other people. But Eddie was never found. And that was very sad for me, but the lesson of Eddie would go is something that my dad would say to me whenever I was freaked out. And after that, that phrase came from a tournament that they did for Eddie. And they don't even let the tournament happen. It only happens like half of the time it's scheduled to happen because the waves have to be over 20 feet tall for the tournament to even be considered. And on one of the first times that they were holding this in the early 80s, when I was tiny, they were freaked out getting started. And that's when the first time somebody said, oh, Eddie would go, let's get out there and let's give it a shot. And so anyway, with that, these are my guides. This is Duke Kahanamoku, this is Eddie Aikau, this is my dad, Tali, Haleua, and I'm a total poser. I am so haole. Like, imagine me, there I am, tumbling underwater, up my nose, trying to count to 30 before I panic, and I pop up, and I hear my dad just laughing, hey, Squiddo. That's his nickname for me. Squiddo is like a guy who surfs like this because he doesn't know what to do. Hey, Squiddo, come try again. And so that's where it kind of shifts. Look how cool my dad is. I will never, ever be that cool. And I love him a lot, and he passed away a few months ago. And that's part of the reason why I talked to you about him. Because this Thanksgiving, when we're praying, I'm thinking about my dad, I'm thinking about you. And so it's partly because of what he taught me. I'm horrible at surfing. Some of you got to see that even before I was hired. I got to go to a team activity and pretend to surf. But my dad taught me 4 things that I think applies to where we are now as a company. He says, first, you have to read the pattern of the sets coming in. That's when you know when to go or when not to. And every time I hear about how this company came to be, I am very grateful for the patterns that were read. And I feel like the second principle my dad taught me of where you start as you position yourself and try to get into the wave is what matters the absolute most. And I'm very happy that we were positioned as a category creator. And we're starting off on this wave in the exact right spot. And the third thing is when you are hesitant because you feel like this wave is going to eat you, you have to just double down and recommit again all the way. And that's what I feel it's doing right now. And the fourth thing is your body follows your eyes. And that's where I think we can all continue to improve. Right now, we're noticing other surfers in the water, screw you, Rocket Lane, and we're noticing shark fins with a crappy economy. And we're starting to notice how big the wave is, going, wow, this is really intense. And if we take our eyes off of those three things and we focus on why the app was built, to quote Pete, it was built for providers to be able to engage with customers. And if we keep our eyes on that, that's where we're going to win. I was just interviewing Matt last week, and he repeated that same thing. The company that will win will be the company that stays focused on engaging with customers. And I really do believe that. So I took a test to find out how Hawaiian I was. I found out I was way more Japanese than Hawaiian. That just proves how highly I am. But in here, there's these 32 star houses, and that's exactly how they were able to get this boat to Tahiti, and they stayed focused on what matters most to them, and that customer engagement is what matters to us. And I was all ready to give this presentation. I got this text on Saturday. This guy is one of my very, very best friends, and he says to me, "Hey Chris, I heard you recently changed companies. I'm really pissed that you didn't choose me. Even though you didn't choose me, what would it take for you to reconsider and leave and come and join our company instead?" And I had to tell him, "Sorry, my friend, I love you, but you are on the wrong wave. This is the wave that I want to be on. Because when I'm here, we believe in wisdom, trust, and human. And we have an opportunity that is unlike anything I've seen in my career. And even though I love to go work with my friends before, there's nothing that would distract me from working here with you. And so if I could just throw in three last little pieces of what I think Eddie would go means, specifically for us here at GUIDEcx with wisdom, trust, and human, it's what we just heard earlier. Storytellers rule the world. We have a strong story, and we should be proud of it, and we should share it. And one of the books that has taught me that the most is this book by a man named Brent Dykes. And if you ever want to look it up, Data Storytelling, one of the best books I've ever read on wisdom in business. The second thing around trust, there's many principles that are taught in this book called the speed of trust, and we all wish we have a little bit more speed. But the number one thing that I took away from this is that in every interaction, you've got to choose whether you're going to try and bless someone or impress them. And our natural default is trying to impress people. But if we instead will set that aside and sincerely just see what they need and try and bless them, you'll find that there's a lot more trust built much faster. And the last thing about being human, really believing that love casts out all fear. This book saved my marriage. And then it also really helped me a ton in my relationships at work, leadership, and self-deception. So those are my three little takeaways that I suggest you check out. And really, at Thanksgiving, I'm thankful for you and the opportunity and this wave that we're on. That's it.
Oh man, that was awesome. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, can we just stop it now? Eddie would go. Yeah, I'm gonna have to remember that, because we've been doing some hard things, and we're going to continue doing hard things, and it's going to be scary sometimes. But I'm very excited